All right, so I run the emerging technology team for Paul Smith for public sector. And we have a good panel here, and we have 20 minutes, so we're going to dive right into just a quick introduction for each of you guys, and then we'll go through some topics on how you're running containers in your use case. Want to start with you, Nitin?
Sure. So I'm Nitin Naik. I'm the Technical Director for Strategic Planning and Technology Direction at the IRS. How many of you are aware of the IRS? But one of the key factors that I'm looking at is how do we use containers and how do we use some of the technology that has been discussed this morning within our environments to deliver services both for you as the taxpayer, businesses, and then also for internal processes.
Tom?
My name is Tom Chamberlain. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called EdLogics. EdLogics is a health education-based consumer engagement company, and we're an innovator in game-based learning. And our mission is to improve health literacy and empower individuals to take greater control of their health. And we do that through delivering a personalized educational experience using interactive multimedia, interactive health games, innovative incentives, and gamification strategies. And we think that we're on to a big opportunity. We deliver that to employers, health plans, federal agencies, and consumers in general. And for this group here, it may be pertinent, our chairman of the board is the former secretary of HHS, Tommy Thompson.
Peter?
Good morning. I'm Peter Chin from the U.S. Courts. I currently am the Chief of Application Development and Architecture. So when I first joined the U.S. Courts, I took a tour of the Supreme Court, and I don't know if everybody here has had that opportunity, but in the center garden of the U.S. courts, every statue sits on top of a turtle. And the explanation is that justice is a very slow process. So when I joined, and of course in the IT world, I wanted to not make it a slow process. I wanted to make things more efficient. So I am tasked to find innovation, whether if it's through the local courts, building internally, or buying it through our vendors out in the public sector.
Do you have a mascot for the IT department?
I am looking for one, Joel.
All right, so we'll start with Tom here, since we have, I think, 12 minutes. What were the top business challenges your organization faced that led you to implement the OpenShift container platform?
We had several challenges. First of all, we're anticipating hockey stick style growth, integrating large organizations. So how do we do that efficiently with limited bandwidth and resources? We talked about the investment of resource. I think everyone in the audience would have the same issue, is how do we allow our resources to focus on our core? So we want to build our education as a service platform and not worry about the plumbing around that. So utilizing technologies, container services, OpenShift container platform to manage the scalability so we can scale our customers rapidly. Also the ability, being an agile organization, the ability to rapidly build, test, and deploy new features, functionality, and content as fast as possible, and do that. And also the utilization of our cloud computing resources. How do we increase density and cost effectiveness of delivering our services? So those are some of the challenges real quick. And we've been implementing containers, and we're excited about bringing this into microservices and other applications.
Okay. So, and if there's any questions for these guys after they, I can't really see out there, but if you want to raise your hand, we can ask follow-up questions to their answers. Nitin, what changes did you have to make at IRS to adopt containers?
I want to caution, we haven't fully adopted containers yet, and it was very interesting, when I think it was Ashish and Michael and David, when he asked how many people have adopted cloud and those sort of things. So I think one of the big issues, which Ashish mentioned, is a balance between security, management, and time to market. But unfortunately, the security and management are taking the highest priority. So We at the IRS, we have been on for years, trying to attain world-class IT. I think we are there, but because of that goal, we had implemented ITIL services, CMMI capability for application development. Well, guess what? When you start doing automation and containerization, those processes have to change. And there has to be a renegotiation with all the IT groups, and that is part of what we are working through. We have adopted some of the Red Hat components like Red Hat Linux, JBoss, but to get containerization, there has to be a give and take between the application development people, the IT operations people, and security. And that's one of the key factors that I'm working on. We are close, but it is a give and take. And that is in the slide that Ashish presented, we are going more towards containers in our premises. We are not yet ready to go to the cloud because I think all of you will attest to this, and I think David raised this big time. IRS is dependent on the public trust. If we don't have the public trust, we will not be able to execute all that we do today, which is process taxes, process refunds, so that we can give that back to you and maintain the economy of the country. So those are key factors that we have to work on, and so that is the balancing act that is constantly putting us to figure out how do we adopt this capability.
Peter, any changes in your organization?
Well, when I first started at the U.S. courts, they were going through a journey of changing the culture to be more agile. And so when I came on board, I thought, well, maybe the next step is really to adopt some DevOps best practices, DevSecOps. There were some alarming things that I noticed as I was talking to the different groups. One is building software. So there was one development group that basically had one person build software. He was doing it manually. All the teams who did development work did their development, and then they would rely on this one person to build software. I'm really conscious about making sure that teams think for themselves. So I asked them, how can you mitigate this risk? How can you make it more efficient? So a few weeks later, I found out that they now have 3 people building software manually. That was not the solution I was looking for. So then, as I introduced DevOps, I said, well, let's think about build automation. There's tools out there. Ansible was mentioned here today. And then so they built scripts and they started working. You could build it on a development server. And then as we deployed to lower environments, they were broken. They said, DevOps doesn't work. And I said, no, that's not what I was trying to accomplish. So basically, the point of this whole story is there's got to be consistency with your environment. Your scripts can, if it works in one environment, and if it doesn't work in the others, there's got to be another solution, right? So now we're starting to look into containers, have consistency across different environments, so that if it does compile and it works in development, it'll work in test, it'll work in production. So there's consistency across the board. So I guess to answer the question of what some of the top things that containers provide here at the courts is it solves a real world problem.
Yeah. Is there any questions from the crowd as far as changes inside your organizations that you want to have these guys comment on? From federal? Okay. So how does containers benefit application development, Peter, from your perspective? You kind of touched on it just a second ago, but if you can go deeper into that.
Yeah, and I was listening to David Bray, and I think he had a quote where he talked about pieces of quilt and how you can stitch them together. So I mentioned earlier that I'm looking for innovation, whether it's from the local courts, the vendor community, and so those are the pieces of quilt that I'm thinking about. And so there's got to be a way for them to deliver it to us so that we can kind of piece them together. And having there, I think it was also Mike Hermans that also talked about how there's a lot of innovation with startup companies and things like that. So we want to adopt new technology, find those not necessarily in companies that's been around for a long time, but those that are really hungry. So a way for us to intake a lot of their innovation is through containers.
Any benefits you guys want to comment on around application development?
Yeah, so I think one of the key factors, and you asked me this before, Joel, is a change in terms of our application developers. And this sort of balances with IT management. Anytime we were having a brand new system being built, we would try to introduce new technologies. And what happens with that is the development environment sort of becomes the sandbox. So one of the key things here, and I'm sure there are IT operations and management people here, all that was discussed by Ashish, there is a fundamental set of prerequisites, and I go back to ITIL. You have fundamental paradigms like configuration management, change management, which has to be adopted right up front from the development all the way to production. And that is where the application developers are starting to get into it. They have to give up something to gain this automation. And we have to build the automated testing capabilities, and you have to build this, what you call capability that, hey, if you're going to change any code, you have to go through a process way in front. You cannot do it after the fact in production. And then you've got all the security requirements. So, you've got CDM, continuous diagnostic monitoring coming down. You've got all the application security. And by the way, you've got all the identity security issues, so the scanning part. So to answer your question, Joel, you have to look at it for the entire pipeline and all the components to say, and the application developers have to take ownership of that. And that's one of the things I think we are slowly getting successful at.
Tom?
Yeah, I think configuration management and change management, like you said, is really important. But probably the biggest thing is just our ability to rapidly deploy through continuous integration, continuous deployment, much more efficient and better utilization of our resources. That's probably the biggest internal thing that we're able to do now is speed to market, get information out, real-time information to our customers in the area of health information and things that are breaking, Zika virus, for example. If we need to deploy quick, it doesn't take 6 weeks to do that with some of our traditional. We're much more rapid and agile.
So the final question for each of you too, and we get this pretty much in every conversation with customers, is okay, I'm interested in containers. Now, where do I start? Without boiling the ocean, you heard a lot of speakers talk about legacy and net new. Do you start in one area? Do you try and start in both areas? Just from your experience, where would you guide other federal agencies to start playing and utilizing containers?
So I'll go first. I actually liked Ashish's slide about the 3 strategies, and we have gone or we are going towards the lift and shift. And what do we mean by that? We have certain services, certain application code. We know it's standardized. And so we are concentrating more on the infrastructure part of standardizing that part and building containers with that service or that code. Because the code, we know it's scanned, security safe, we know it operates. Now we are trying to build the containerization process to fix that part. So that's where we have started on our side.
Okay. Peter?
Coming from a large organization, normally whenever there's new ideas, it takes a long time to adopt. So the approach that we're taking is to find a small problem. So if there's a development effort that's going on, to use products like containers and maybe an OpenShift type platform to develop something that's not necessarily throwaway, something that can be deployed and actually used in the mission. So if you could prove out that you can do this from a small snippet of your portfolio, then there's more believers in the organization to adopt it.
And Tom, from a SaaS perspective, how would you answer that?
Sure. I think the ability to take it slow, you don't have to boil the ocean. I think that's the most important thing. Look at utilizing your open source technologies and containers, but look at bringing on an integrator, a Red Hat partner integrator that will help you to really figure this out and manage this appropriately, both for the short term and the long term. And there's plenty of resources out there. There's the Red Hat Roadshow. Our developers went out in Minneapolis and went to a day-long roadshow and were able to network and get hands-on experience. GitHub has plenty of examples of how to implement container technologies and OpenShift platform containers. So I think there's plenty of resources. Use those, learn about that, and then take it slow and have a plan and utilize some of the resources that are out there through the integrators.
Okay, thanks, guys. Round of applause for these guys.